Hello again and welcome to another exciting and I hope inspirational interview with me, Anne Diamond, here on Viking.TV. It's strange but true that my special guest today has not set foot yet on a Viking cruise ship, even though he has spent most of his adult life going Viking. Now, until I was preparing to meet him, I'd never even heard that phrase before, going Viking, but apparently for centuries, it's always meant going adventuring or going exploring. So it makes pretty cool sense for everybody here in Viking Cruises for me to be doing this interview. Now, this special guest grew up in Canada and loves to explore the world, but particularly parts of the world where the ancient Nordic explorers, the classic Vikings, touched, traded, left their mark. And his best-selling books on this subject are called Gone Viking, a travel saga, Gone Viking II, Beyond Boundaries, and Gone Viking III, the Holy Grail. Let's get a quick taster now then of what they're all about, and this video says it best. So yes, wow, please meet writer, traveller, artist, musician, and even one-time student chef, Bill Arnott. Hello and welcome.
Hello, Anne. What a genuine pleasure and privilege to join you here on Viking TV. Thank you.
Oh, and look at the longship behind you as well. Couldn't be better. There's so much to talk to you about. I don't really know where to start. So I'll ask you how your whole interest in Vikings started.
Well, my wife, Deb, and I had been privileged to be traveling for a number of years as tourists, and I always liked venturing into museums. And we were in Scandinavia at one point, and it occurred to me, gosh, I've been to many of these places. There could be a story here. And I was doing some travel writing, but I was also aware of the fact I was starting to forget some of the places we'd visited, Anne. I wasn't great with respect to journaling or photographing these places. And I thought, my goodness, I need a record for when the memory starts to lapse a little more down the road. And I was motivated to keep a good record of it. So imagine, if you will, we were in Roskilde, and that's just west of Copenhagen in Denmark. And there's a fabulous, what they call like a living archaeological Viking museum, where there's actual anthropological and archaeological students and professors, while there's also, it's open to the public. There was a spectacular map on the wall, basically delineating where these Scandinavian explorers, the Vikings, had gone to, where they came, went, raided, traded, settled, emigrated. And these great sweeping red lines, it seemed to cover most of the globe. And like a kid in a candy store, I thought, oh, I want to go to there, when there, in this case, represented like the top half of the globe. And that was when I realized, oh, I could start plugging these holes with a few more years of concentrated, focused travel, research. And those were the seeds of this, my first travel memoir, Gone Viking, a travel saga, where I'm visiting these places with an inquisitive eye, meeting experts, working with archaeologists and anthropologists. And that's a long answer to how this all began.
It's not quite the true answer, though, because I know, having read part of your first book now, that as a child you always wanted to be a Viking and you used to dress up as one. Isn't that right?
Well, you're right. So obviously there was something deeply buried in the DNA. There's a fun photo that I know you've seen of my dad and myself 50 years ago, dressed as Vikings. So I thought, as a kid, well, if I couldn't be an astronaut or a race car driver, maybe there was I could fall back to Viking. And I certainly had the wardrobe set up already. There's a wonderful, there's the shot. Where I grew up in Vernon, British Columbia, they have a marvelous winter carnival, the second largest in Canada behind the one in Quebec City. And it's a bleak time of the year in February, and the community would come out, build floats, do costumes, march around downtown, and it was just sort of like a winter celebration. And at that time, my dad and I became part of this little ragtag army of improvised Vikings. There were about a dozen of us marauding the streets of downtown Vernon, British Columbia. And at that point, I suppose a seed was sown. I love the notion of howling at strangers, which I hope to reprise, in old age. But I didn't really appreciate all the historical elements. But you're right, maybe that sowed a seed with the Viking bent.
That's interesting because I interviewed a genealogist a short while ago who specializes in sort of tracing Viking DNA. And an awful lot of us in the world have Viking DNA. Perhaps you do.
Well, yes. Well, now I'm afraid to get the test in case someone decides I'm a fraud.
Yeah.
So now my dad was Scottish, so that's high probability. My mom was Ukrainian, and so certainly that some of those Eastern European nations near the Baltic, that would be a very high probability as well, bordering on what's now Russia. And there I am with Dad celebrating his 80th birthday. So one of the things that's sort of a neat genealogical trait, this comes from one of the northern universities in Scotland, with 10% of Ireland, Scotland, Wales having red hair. And that is a distinct Scandinavian genealogical trait. And so I do get some red in the beard. So that to me is pretty good test for validity.
You probably do have Viking DNA, but as you say, it's almost tempting fate to try and trace it deliberately, isn't it?
Perhaps.
Now, that first book, the saga, was it the first book you've ever written?
I had written a travel-themed memoir prior to that. I had no commercial aspirations with it. I shared a few copies with friends and relatives, but then people I admired started saying very kind and complimentary things. People that I wasn't expecting them to say kind and complimentary things. They weren't necessarily relatives or that circle of immediate friends. And I thought, well, perhaps there is something. And I did work hard with mentors for a number of years to hone that craft. I've always loved that armchair escape. I've been for years reading not only Sir Michael Palin, who you visited recently, and people like Anna Badkin, Jan Morris, Paul Theroux, and of course Robert McFarlane. These are some of my favorites. And I thought, wow, I want to write what I like to read in this similar vein. And that really got things going. But so I chose to share this Gone Viking, a travel saga, with a few more folks. And wouldn't you know it, I was delighted and flattered that it got some book awards. And next thing you know, it was a surprise bestseller. And the publisher was excited and surprised. And we were delighted with these connections we were making with readers and subsequent fans all over the globe. And
I know, I would say to anyone who starts it, they'll immediately find that it's not what you think a travel writer is going to give you. It's almost like being drawn into a detective story, because you want to know what's happening next and what you find next and where life takes you, where your journey takes you, where you're going Viking. But what I found, what I was really surprised at in the first book, I thought, right, if we're looking at a Viking saga, we're obviously going to start in Scandinavia. And of course, you start off coming, first of all, to London by plane, and then you end up in, of all places, Reading, which I know quite well, and then going to St. Ives in Cornwall. What made you start there?
Well, there is a neat, a tidy historical link with respect to Reading, as there had been not only battles there when early Scandinavians in what we now call England were fighting with King Ethelred and Alfred before he took the throne, and it almost delineated a line between Anglo-Saxon England and what would become the Danelaw or Scandinavian England. And so there was a great historical thread there. I was en route to a literature festival in Cornwall, so there was a convenience factor. And just by taking a step back, literally raising the microscope, I realized, my goodness, I am in the heart of a great depth of broad-based Scandinavian history. Yeah. And it just seemed like a brilliant sort of bullseye to radiate out from there. So there was some logistics involved, but it did make a great deal of sense. And there's a spectacular Viking sword in one of the museums in Reading that is a literal touchstone to work from and go from there. Not unlike, as you say, a bit of an unraveling, a mystery, if you will, or a treasure hunt.
Yeah, they found it in the bottom of the river in Reading, didn't they? And it's a Viking sword. What on earth is it doing there?
Well, that's what I love, is the dot ellipses. It's so many questions. And I even allude to this in the book, perhaps what it was, or in the manner it wasn't used. Maybe it didn't represent a war. You think of the myths of King Arthur, and it was always these, like Excalibur was intended to heal, not harm. A symbol, think of knighting, being knighted. These can be encapsulating potential and coming together and aspirations towards peace. And I found that wonderful symbolism.
Yes, it is. In your travels as well through the English countryside, didn't you also sort of stumble across what's thought to be the grave of King Harold, the one who was shot in the eye on the Bayeux Tapestry?
Well, yes. And I found this, and more often than not, especially around coastal areas around all of the UK, invariably there's Viking history there. Now here's a fun one, traipsing around from St. Michael's Mount in Cornwall, it's in Newlyn, Penzance there. But you see that scallop shell on that sign. Anyways, it's an extension of the Camino, and you can really find these pilgrimage paths that lead all across Europe from the UK and onwards, these salt paths. And so many of these, again, with the coastal enclaves, a brilliant, rich, evocative Viking or Scandinavian history. And you're right, you did mention this out of the gates, and to go a Viking or to go Viking. I did play off the fact that small v Viking, it was a verb originally, to go voyaging, exploring, and to make your bones, and in a lot of cases emigrating to look for new land. So many of these Vikings were farmers and artisans, and it was not about necessarily pillaging or history isn't always written by the victors, as we know, and this is an example that may get skewed, and every culture has their colored history and past. So part of me wanted to say that, there are so many similarities to current European history. There's folks looking to find a safe new homeland to raise a family, maybe grow some things, get a job, and I found this is a timeless story.
It is, but it's almost as though, I mean, we need you to be able to point us to it, and then we can go, oh yes, look at that. But you equally found things that staggered you. Like in one place, there was evidence of generations of men who had overly developed upper bodies, as known in Viking excavations, suggesting generations of archers.
Yes, and that was a fascinating one, very UK-based. Think of those longbows and what were, defining moments in battles in the 100 Years' War. 200 years of being, by law, you would train in your archery. And in that vein, with the Scandinavians, a rowing culture, waterborne activities, not only for voyaging and venturing, but fishing and trading. And sure enough, with enough repeated use, when you have enough upper body muscle mass, those bones have to accommodate to carry that. So we would find these skeletons with overly developed shoulders and pectorals, and we're talking about both genders. And this was a common genealogical trait for those golden age of Vikings that we think of from the late 700s to the 1100s and beyond.
I love that, because that makes you feel closer to them than the centuries would usually allow. Did you feel closer to the ancient Vikings as you sort of went further north then to Scotland and the Northern Isles?
It's certainly, as you know, evident, certainly in the language. I mean, I see similarities between the Orkney flag and from Scandinavian nations. A third, and you may know this as I understand it, of all our current English words are derived from Old Norse. So it's peppered through certainly Western European culture. A great quote from an archaeologist I was working with, he said, the only reason we have countries like England, France, Germany, Russia today is because of the Vikings. Those borders were delineated as a result of those immigrating people and creating these nations, what we associate with Europe today.
You see, the things you're talking about now, and this is how you pepper everything in your books, a little bit of knowledge here, somebody you met there who told you this, that you read that you watched a movie like that. You must, before you even set off on your travels, you must be a huge reader and also a watcher of movies, because your knowledge of absolutely anything is amazing.
Well, thank you, Anne. And we're all in this together. And I consider myself an enthusiast, but sure enough, over time, you do hone a bit of expertise in these various areas. Yes, I'm a voracious reader, and but like anyone, I do like the brain candy of movies as well. And I was inspired reading Neil Oliver's Viking book. You saw that in the Gone Viking, a travel saga. That was like a little travel companion. And then eventually we became friends as a result of that. And I was teasing him about, do you think I'm plagiarizing your book? He said, we don't use that term. It's inspiration. So one of the things being, we both loved 1958 film Vikings with Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And well, exactly. That makes it live, doesn't it? Some of it they got right, maybe some of it they got wrong, but you've been finding little bits and pieces along the way that have made you very fond of that movie. How long did it take you then? Did you write the book along the way, or did you go back home and write it?
A little of both, Anne. So it really was an 8-year project, adding up these, not continuous travel, but there'd be 2-month chunks frequently, a couple of 4-month sojourns and excursions. I was definitely taking notes and journaling along the way, especially when I'm visiting with experts or just folks getting great sound bites and tales. I'm taking notes and journaling, and researching. But a lot of the heavy lifting with respect to the research and writing was done in between the travels at home, when I just had access to things and other individuals, or follow-ups with archival notes from university connections and that sort of thing.
And then you did it again. You did it again for another book. So where did the next journey take you? And why is it called Beyond Boundaries?
Thank you. That's a question I'm excited to answer. So I did have a lot of fun sharing Gone Viking, a travel saga, that first book, and as I said, delighted with the being embraced by folks all over the world. And I didn't feel done, Anne. I thought there's more story to tell.
Yeah. We've got a little bit of video of basically about the second book and all the travels you went on. As we look at that video, tell us what you're experiencing, because there are some spectacular images, as we'll see, and amazing places that you went. So as we look at it, maybe it'll remind you of some memories. Let's have a quick look at that now.
Perfect.
And you can talk us through what we're seeing.
And here we go.
The next adventure, literally.
So we're talking about Gone Viking 2, Beyond Boundaries, and I'm literally going further geographically. Here we are descending into the South Pacific. This is Lord Howe Island, and I'm trekking through the bush, some praise quotes, and we can come back and talk more. This is on the west coast of Australia, again, trekking through some bush. I'm in a kayak here, waterfalls, so a lot of this is South Pacific, Oceania.
Oh, look at that.
Cathedral Cove in New Zealand. Now I'm in Hawaii, so following perhaps Captain Cook's steps to a degree. Yeah. And now we're back in the UK, Stone Circle, Orkney, you recognize Northern Scotland, and here, yes. Great Wall of China. So I did venture into all around the Pacific. A fabulous HMS Bounty there at the Sydney Opera House. Now we're back up in the Orkney there. And so we're bopping around a lot of the globe with the photos. Here we are back in southwest England, a Hawaiian waterfall, and again, the sunset off the extreme southwest toe of England.
So go on. You were saying, I mean, you can just tell from the various places you've been through just in that last minute, beyond boundaries, literally you have no boundaries. You went anywhere that was interesting, or did they have particular Viking associations?
So this Beyond Boundaries, I thought, not only geographically, but also taking a little artistic leap with that original verb, to go Viking, to go voyaging. And I thought, my goodness, I've been following so many of these famous Scandinavian explorers. What about these other Vikings? Weren't Cook and Drake Vikings in their way? We can talk a little bit about the painting behind me for Canada Week. Again, so many indigenous nations around the globe were, in my opinion, Vikings and voyagers in their way. Artisans, craftspeople, looking for new lands and new adventure, yes. And at times perhaps expanding the gene pool. So Gone Viking 2, Beyond Boundaries was very much about just expanding borders and boundaries in more ways than one, artistically, from an explorer and adventurer's perspective, from a literary perspective, and yet more often than not, I thought, hey, Thor Heyerdahl, the great Norse explorer, wasn't he a modern-day Viking in his way, circling the Pacific, unraveling new historical threads and posing new questions and answering a few as well? So I took that on board, and that's what prompted that second adventure with a much broader global reach.
Did you plan it out? You know, have you got stick-it notes all over a wall somewhere where you actually planned where you were going to go and why? Or do you have a sort of wanderlust about it and just let your feet do the walking?
Certainly with Gone Viking, a travel saga, and now the new book, Gone Viking 3, the Holy Grail, it was predominantly methodical planning. Oh, these to me I felt were very key sites. I think it's important to the story to unravel this mystery, as I alluded to, like a treasure hunt. I think it stitches the tale together efficiently, effectively, holistically. So there was very much a concentrated effort to hit key points along the way and to feel that I'm sharing the story as thoroughly as possible.
Well, that's it. That word keeps coming up again and again. You are telling a story. You're not telling people where to go and why, and what's the cheapest time of the year to stay there. You are telling stories everywhere you go. And it just made me wish that I had a history or a geography teacher like you, who could say, all right, we're at Plymouth, we're looking out over the sea. This is where Sir Francis Drake looked. And across that grassy expanse sits Viking Rock, erected, and I'm quoting from you, erected to memorialise the Danish raids here in 997. Nobody ever taught me history or geography like that.
Well, that was one of those things to me, like uncovering a hidden gem. There we are, for example, as you know, you go to Plymouth, you see Smeaton's Tower, you see Drake, you see the Hoe, and of course, obviously, present day nautical, maritime, military presence. And there in the shadows at the edge of the park, son of a gun, there's Viking history there as well, just waiting to be unearthed. And it's not a secret, it's not hidden, but it's just not necessarily obvious.
No, but you look at it in a way, knowing the history, knowing the story, you were able to look at the cliffs and you said, because the Vikings were trying to invade and they were put back at least once. And you said what an ugly climb it is from the shore over rough terraced ground. And the raiders landing there must have been beyond courageous or desperate. And they'd even done it 100 years earlier to King Alfred as well, and he actually blockaded them. So, I mean, you know the story, and you're able to look at it and describe and almost feel the history of it.
There are some marvelously powerful images. Well, here's a fun one. So here's Tintagel, and you may recognize that, which ties into Gone Viking 3, the Holy Grail, where I'm finding these fun overlapping threads and perhaps commonality between the myth and the history of Arthurian knights and what we call the Jomsvikings, these chivalric Scandinavians from Northern Europe. In the back of this photo, Anne, you'll see that lighthouse and sorry, that next frame there. This is near Land's End, again in Cornwall. Those rocks and the lighthouse, just in the distance there, those were called the longships. Those rocks. So you can imagine for, obviously, centuries or a millennia, locals always keeping an eye on the horizon to see, are folks coming? Should we be threatened? Or is this a trading group? And you realize, gosh, all of these landmarks do represent rich history.
And well, obviously, I mean, that's beautiful old England, isn't it? And you can still have the odd steam train. Where is that?
So that's Devon, and that's the Agatha Christie steam train that goes up to the Greenway House. And that to me was just a lovely visual, coastal hiking.
That was the other thing I wanted to say. I mean, not only are you a writer, and I know you're an artist, and we'll talk about your art in a second, but you are clearly a great photographer. I mean, you just capture some images that say it all.
Well, thank you. Earlier I was saying I wasn't a good particular shutterbug and realized I didn't have many records of these kind of things, so I tried to do a little bit more. This was a fun one. I just got off the train. It's 5 a.m. I'm jet lagged. And I just went out for a walk, and I thought, oh, I'll get a nice shot of sunrise, and those are my footprints. And I thought,
yes, they're your footprints.
Doesn't that look like a greeting card? But on the headland there is the Chapel of St. Nicholas, patron saint of sailors or fishermen, depending upon who you ask.
Lovely story too about why we call Bluetooth, and why the little thing that says Bluetooth on our computers, the symbol, looks so like Nordic runes or something.
Because it is. And the makers of that technology, it's very much a nod to the Scandinavian past. King Harold and his yelling stones, he and his father, that's part of the Danish history. It's in the passports, it's on the currency. And so there's a pride in the Nordic runes, and think of what that means, Bluetooth technology. King Harold, in his way, was able to communicate across what they thought were unbridgeable gaps, culturally, politically, religiously. So it's a fascinating history that is utterly relatable here 1,000 years later.
Yeah. I know, isn't that wonderful? Wouldn't they be proud? Let's have a look at more of a flip through your photo album then, and you can tell us where we are and why you've taken that particular photograph and what it means to you. Let's look through a few more pictures if we can. Now, this comes up a few times. In fact, it comes up later in your artwork, I think. Where's that?
So this is Lunga. So we've sailed from Iona, so we're in Scotland's Hebrides. And there's Lunga and Staffa, and you'd know Staffa from Fingal's Cave. And there's a spectacular puffin colony, and they're just docile and inquisitive. They apparently like when people are hanging around. They know it keeps predators at bay, and they just go about their business. And it was utterly like a connection with nature, and they're such fascinating birds.
And we saw a picture earlier. Oh, look, that's another lovely one. How can you say you're not a great photographer? I mean, utterly wonderful views that just make you want to go there. But as I say, it's even more special when you know there might be a story to any of them. That is where?
Dartmouth. So
that's it?
Yes, mouth of the Dart. I believe that's St. Peter's Pedrick's chapel, so great Celtic history there, along with the maritime history, obviously.
And those gravestones, they almost look like standing stones, don't they?
Don't they? And to me, it's as though they're nodding, you know, a somber energy there, and it feels deeply spiritual, whatever you do or
Very,
don't believe.
yes, very. Oh, there you are again with your footprints. Ah, now this is quintessential. I don't know. Is it? Does this happen anywhere other than England? The row of beautifully painted beach huts. Where did you find these?
This is Devon, and so I've never experienced it elsewhere. So that I took a great panoramic shot. It happened to be a spectacular array of freshly painted beach houses. So when I'm sharing my photos around the world, we get quintessential Britannia there.
Do you know, on some British beaches, they could be worth £250,000 to buy now. Unbelievable. So go on. Oh, we've seen some of those, and we've seen the beautiful train, which I love so much. Yes. Now you clearly, through your photography, I can see this. You're fascinated by archways and looking through walls, and I don't know. It's sort of like an ancient window on the world.
I do like that, and I'm not even sure how often I was conscious of it, but finding these things, grasping St. Michael's Mount, as you know, there, and at Tintagel, and you would probably know this as well, there's a fabulous statue, like a plein air design of Arthur, where it's almost like an outline. So you can't see King Arthur without seeing the land and the sea. And it's a brilliant exhibit. And I think I'm perhaps influenced by that, trying to capture layering things, seeing one thing through another from another perspective. And maybe that's the inner poet in me, always looking for the angle or a different interpretation.
Well, the poet in you, yes, but I wonder if we can spin through to the photographs we've got of your artwork, because you have taken these lovely photographs and you've obviously at some point gone back and thought, there's more I can do. Can you explain your artwork and how you do it?
Certainly. So here's a fun example where I've taken a photo. It happened to be, I thought, a stunning image, but I thought, what else can we do with this? How far can I take this artistically? So this is all done digitally, and I customized a couple of software applications that I then put the photo through. So I'm not changing anything. I'm just enhancing certain things, maybe making it a little more stylized, or I like to use the term cool, if you will. And yeah. That's what this is. I consider it almost like a two-dimensional mixed media. Here's a wonderful abandoned train line. This is on Vancouver Island. And again, all I'm doing is enhancing what's there. I just happened to catch this lovely, no telephoto. This is just a mama black-tailed deer and her doe. This is a unique strain of deer. They only exist in this pocket of Vancouver Island off British Columbia's Pacific coast.
My goodness, it looks beautiful. And there again, yes, you do it to all sorts of photographs. There's something almost Van Gogh about that sky, isn't there?
Well, that to me was certainly catching my eye. We happened to be exploring and traveling during a 3-month window of spectacular weather, so I couldn't help but get these brilliant blues and greens. That was a hawk pestering.
Now isn't this the cover of your very latest book as well?
Oh, yes, well done. A Season on Vancouver Island is a travel memoir set a little closer to home. This is the Salish Bear Totem from Vancouver Island. Here I'm hamming it up.
That's you.
And I was absolutely inspired by Michael Palin's cover from his North Korean book, where it was a bit cheeky. We're doing and this would be my campaign for Gone Viking 3 in 2023. Welcome aboard.
Absolutely. And and again, you've taken photographs, this one obviously from the aeroplane, and again have used those in your art. There we go. Isn't that gorgeous? I think we've got another one, I think, where we see the photograph as it may have started out. Oh, and that's another rendering, isn't it?
Yes.
But I think we've got another coming up of where we see the original photograph and then what you've done with it. That must be great fun. So it ends up as a digital image, which then, of course, you could have blown up as a piece of art on. Do you put your own art on your walls?
I haven't.
I always wonder that about artists, whether they actually think, oh, I could put one of mine up there.
Well, here's a fun one. An acquaintance moved into the home of a very famous Canadian artist in Ontario, and he had done a pencil sketch covering an entire wall, And when the new folks moved in, he said, "Oh, you can paint over that if you like." And they said, "Thank you. No, we'll keep it. It's actually a gorgeous rendering." So people do it, obviously, but I'm not one of them yet, perhaps.
We've also got, I think, a couple of photographs of some of your readers, your fans, because you are a writer who likes very much to interact with your readers, don't you?
I really do, and it happened wonderfully organically. And so then I labeled it, and we call it our hashtag Gone Viking Community. And wouldn't you know it, certainly some of this happened as a result of lockdown, and folks were just excited for armchair escape, like Viking TV, like planning for the next great adventure. And folks were sharing, not only liking that escape, this was a fun one from central Canada. They said, yes, apparently Turnip the cat is a voracious reader. No.
Turnip the cat. What do you think of social media? Is it very important to a writer like you?
Well, I've been humbled by the connection with readers, and want to insist on that accessibility. Folks saying, here's what your book meant to me. We were perhaps reading it and grieving something, and we got a lovely escape and a laugh out of it, and thank you. And what a privilege is that? Occasionally someone will say, you got this point wrong, and I do value that. But usually it's folks saying, this is fun, and thank you, and when's the next one? Or I was reading this very passage while I was at this museum in XYZ, and it's fun because I do that too, and I love that connection. And social media makes it possible.
You're also a musician, and by the look of it, you're quite an experienced one. Is that something you've done from the very beginning?
No, this would have been something I've done. I've always played music, but certainly doing it professionally more recently. There's a marvelous story behind that guitar as well, Anne. That's called the Voyageur guitar. And it's comprised of no less than 90 historical pieces of Canadiana. Every little component made by a brilliant East Coast luthier. And you may know of the story called the Golden Spruce. There was this remarkable 300-year-old spruce. That's an evergreen. However, this one was entirely gold, like more rare than in color, more rare than an albino. In the animal kingdom. So this spectacular historic golden spruce, revered and spiritually significant to the indigenous nations and folks of all walks of life. So a protester cut that down a few years back. It was a terrible, terrible loss. Yeah. Having said that, elders and chiefs allowed a piece of this golden spruce to be cut, the only piece removed, living from this fallen tree, and that made the basis of that Voyageur guitar. It was a remarkable, and now it tours around the country. Its objective to be touched and played and contributed to by as many folks as possible. When I touched it, 150,000 Canadians had played it. When I got my crack at it, it was wonderful.
Yeah, including you.
Including me on a stage in a town called Duncan, BC. What
sort of music do you play?
I would call it acoustical indie folk. So
get my head around that. And what about the next adventure then? I mean, are you already planning the next adventure, the next Viking?
Well, right now we're certainly, my publicity team is excited around the release of Gone Viking III, the Holy Grail. So all that comes with that is, speaking and visiting and reading and signing things. So we're very much in the thick of that right now. I'm enjoying the process again, making new friends and connections. So the next adventure, not sure yet, Anne, but really? Certainly inspired by
You haven't planned it yet? It's been great to meet you. I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying the book. I only got it last night, but I have been reading it all today, and it's lovely. It's charming and lovely, and you can't help but be pulled in. You have to turn the next page and find out what's going on. Like I said, to me, it's like reading a detective story, and it's full of things that you think, I thought I knew my country. I thought I knew Reading. I thought I knew Cornwall. And I certainly thought I knew Scotland. But you found things out about it that I had never even heard. And I think that's what most people must find so delightful in your work. Congratulations. And I mean, I just can't believe we haven't had you on Viking TV before. But it's just been brilliant to meet you. Thank you so much, and thank you for being able to convey that enthusiasm for journeying and traveling, even those of us who only do it through your books. Fascinating. Oh, I've got one more question.
All right.
It's about you dropping out of culinary college.
Well, I did, as a middle-aged man, I thought maybe I want something else I could do, and I thought, wouldn't it be romantic if I had a ticket and I could in fact work as I'm traveling anywhere? That seemed like a great transferable skill set, and so I jumped into culinary school. There's a great long program, one of our universities here in Vancouver, and it was fabulous. And I was the old guy in the class, and these great professional chefs, and you learn that whole routine like we see Gordon Ramsay. He's a kind version of the institution, and that's part of the process apparently. So the cycle goes. But I did learn a number of skill sets. The course was divided into sections of a year. I did several months. Felt I was had just enough to be perhaps dangerous in the kitchen, and I was delighted and satisfied. Again, made some friends, got some stories, and carried on with things.
Yeah, you're too busy to just stick at one thing, aren't you, really? Thank you so much for coming on Viking TV. It's a wonder you haven't been on before, but we hope you'll be on again, actually, and maybe one day you'll actually set foot on a Viking cruise ship, because, well, it would be the right thing to do, wouldn't it? Thank you so much, Bill.
And a genuine pleasure and privilege, and I do look forward to our next visit, and thank you for your very kind words.
Thank you. So there you are. That was Bill Arnott, adventurer and enthusiast, and so many other things as well. Let's leave you, shall we, with the whiz through Bill's various pictures and books. And by the way, if you want to read more of his work, there's a link on this Viking TV page. So thanks again to Bill, and I'll be back with you again very soon. From me and Diamond, bye-bye.